Welcome. I'm Dr. Dawson, and I want us to talk a little bit today about why isn't the internet a little better at medicine? It helps us with tons of other stuff, but it's still not very good at medicine. And don't worry, it is not lost on me that it's a little hypocritical for me to be talking to you over the internet about why you should avoid the internet. But that's what I'm here for today. It really comes down to the fact that there's just too much information. It's just overwhelming, and the more you read, the more confused you are, and the sadder you are, and it just makes your life worse. And so I would encourage people to try to spend as little time on the internet as possible. I tell folks that even if you spent every waking hour for 3 years reading about medicine on the internet, at best you could catch up with the third-year medical student. And that would be a waste of your time, because no one wants a third-year medical student taking care of them, not because they don't have a lot of information, but because they don't have any experience. So they don't really know what to do with all that information. I think that there's two main causes of why the internet's not more useful. One is probably medicine's fault, and that is that medicine is taught worst case scenario. Not sure that's the best way. I'm not sure it would have been better to teach us, what's the most common thing for each symptom and start with that. But I guess they figure if you know about the worst possible, possibility in each symptom, that you can work your way to the common things, with time. And so, the bad part about that is, I spent my first 5 years in practice, thinking everything was cancer. And it took me seeing particular symptoms about 1,000 times for me to realize, the last 1,000 times I've had someone come in with this symptom, it wasn't cancer. And so now I think I'm going to treat this as if it's the most likely thing that it looks like to me, and keep the cancer thing in the back of my mind. So worst case scenario is the way it's taught. And if you're reading that as a person who doesn't have a ton of experience, it will be exceedingly frightful. And it's like if people ask me, and they frequently do, what's the worst possible thing that could happen with this symptom that I have? I hate that question, because the answer is almost always, well, death would be the worst case scenario. That would be true of a headache, a stomach ache, a leg that hurts. There's almost no symptom that there's not something really bad that could be causing it. And the internet will point that out right off the bat. So that's one thing. The other difference is the way that the information on the internet comes through to me compared to mom. Let's say a mom comes in with a child who has a fairly rare symptom that I don't see very often, and she and I both go separately and look on the internet to see what we think it might be. And for both of us on the internet, 5 different scenarios come up, and as I go through those 5 things, I look at the first one and say, well, that fits, and that fits, but no, that's not it. And I look at the second one and go, well, that fits, and that looks a little like it, but no, that's not it. And by the time I get through those 5 scenarios, I am pretty convinced that none of those things are a likely possibility at all. Now, when mom goes through those same 5 scenarios, the first one she goes, well, that part fits, that fits. I think that could be it. And then she goes to the second one, and she goes, well, that fits, and that fits, and that fits. I think that could be it. And by the time she gets through all 5, she's pretty thoroughly convinced that her child is the first child in the history of the universe to have all 5 of those rare things at the same time. So there we're looking at the same information, but coming at it with different experience levels and coming out with totally separate results. I feel better having looked at the internet. Mom feels worse. So it's just not a good situation at this point in time. Someday maybe it will be. When the internet first started, there weren't search engines, and so you just randomly got sent from one website to the next in a haphazard manner. Now the guys with search engines have fixed that for us. And so the internet is a very useful tool for tons of things. We're not quite there with medicine yet. Now, I'm not saying that doctors don't relate to this overwhelmed information thing. We also get that. It's just that we have had more time than you to work through that. I remember at the end of my freshman year, they had stuffed our brains with tons of information so that we were bursting at the seams. And you learned during that time that you could go to folks for advice, and there were a lot of smart people around. And you learned that if you have someone who was kind of smart, a kind of smart person could make even a simple thing sound complicated while trying to impress you with how smart they were. You also learned to find those people who were truly smart, and they could make the complicated sound simple with nothing to prove. I was fortunate enough to know one of those guys. The first year we lived in this kind of a combination of a dorm and a co-op and a fraternity. And there were like 30 of us living there. And one of the guys that lived upstairs was a year ahead of us, and his name was Arthur. We actually all called him Smart Art, which is really pretty amazing when you think about it. You got a bunch of folks that all graduated at the top of their class in high school and the top of their class in college, and were a little bit cocky and arrogant, academically. And for them to call somebody, one of their peers, Smart Art, that was a pretty strong compliment. But smart he was. Genius. His whole family was geniuses. They all sat around reading books and never owned a TV and never missed it. But also one of the nicest guys that you could ever meet. Anyway, so we had this problem at the end of the freshman year where they'd given us this illness to try to figure out. And it had kind of a vague symptom, which could have been easily any one of 20 or more different diagnoses. And we had thousands of facts in our heads about all these different illnesses. But it was overwhelming, just like you feel on the internet. And as I was walking by, Smart Art was sitting on the couch reading a book. And I said, Smart Art, a deal like this where you have a vague symptom, it could be any one of 20 things, and I could run 1,000 different tests, to try to figure that out. Where would you start? And he closed his book and he looked up and he said, Tom, I'd start with the things that I could fix. I said, the things that we can't fix, we have all the time in the world to figure those things out later. So that day, I got a little medical wisdom from someone who had more medical experience than I did. And I'd used Art's wisdom in that regard many times over the last 40 years and taught it to a lot of other young doctors. And so I would encourage you, instead of trying to get more information, to find someone that maybe has a little bit more medical experience and take advantage of that experience. So I think that we need smart arts in this world. Take my own personal case. When I go for my medical care, I know tons of adult medicine, but I don't take care of older adults. And so as far as that's concerned, I'm like a third-year medical student, tons of knowledge, but not much experience. So like you, I have to look out into my community and find a doctor that I can trust, where I can go to him and not tell him what I saw on the internet about my issues, but where I can say, what do you think I should do? So I would recommend you to spend more time looking for that person, find the person you can trust, less time on the internet, since it's only going to make you feel worse. And I think that find that person you can trust, and that's the thing that'll make you feel better. I hope that helps.